Coming up, we're going to be telling you our favorite seasons of Power Rangers and why. I'm Ryno.
I'm Ken.
And we are the Podcast Rangers.
Ranger.
Oh my God, you are garbage at this.
That's what I do.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Again, I am Ryno, joined as always by
Ken.
Yes, I do want you to say your name again. Thank you. Good job. Good work.
Fantastic.
We are recording this episode 3 of our podcast, the third episode, although we did technically try and make this podcast once before, so who knows what number this actually is, but regardless, we are practicing our social distancing, and we are recording this at our separate homes this time. So this is new for us.
Solo studios.
Yeah. So this will be no face-to-face, so no fisticuffs if we get in any sort of arguments here or anything like that. But
real bummer.
I know. I look forward to slapping you. It's really the one joy in life. Just a quick
silent slapping
is in a backhand.
Really what gets it.
It's is it that like a silent disco?
Yeah, kind of. It's like that, but also like, how do you slap somebody, but you don't want the audience to know? So I feel like we perfected that.
Yeah.
Something I appreciate, but also hate because sore cheeks.
Yeah. Yeah, that's your that's your like spirit name, sore cheeks. Like Jonathan Taylor Thomas in Man of the House. Sorry, no. I have digressed way too far. Anyway, so we thought, as getting to know us, since this is a newer podcast, that one of the essential things when getting to know people is asking them what their favorite season of Power Rangers is and having that debate. And I'd like everyone out there to know that the answer for us, I'm confidently answering for both of us without having discussed this with Ken ahead of time, is that we can say that we like other seasons beyond Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. We're not those people.
I can't believe you said that.
How dare you? How dare you?
Now, that being said, we will say, Mighty Morphin obviously being the original that we saw is kind of what got us into it. So there's always going to be that level of respect for that and love for those helmets and all that.
Well, here, the thing is, I'm giving you, I say that as I'm literally looking at, in front of me, I have a Blue Ranger helmet on my shelf because I have a Blue Ranger cosplay I've done once or twice. I have the blue Mighty Morphin, and then I have the blue Boom Studios Pink Ranger comic version of his suit as well. But I just like to talk about me, but
I'm like recording this and I'm looking around what's in front of me right now, and I have two like either Legacy Lightning helmets of Mighty Morphin stuff, a Saba, and like the Zack in with a dragon shield thing. So like definitely a love for Mighty Morphin, but I would be hard pressed to say like that's my favorite season or set of seasons.
Listen, and I do want to start. I'm actually going to start it off by saying that to say that Mighty Morphin is not one of my favorite seasons is a lie. I do love Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and I specifically love Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Season 1. I like as it goes into Season 2, I really enjoy Lord Zed. I love that aesthetic of Lord Zed. I love the aesthetic of his palace and all that sort of stuff.
Skin.
I don't like when it shifts into the Tommy show. That's the thing I don't like. And that happens, I feel like, once he's the White Ranger.
Throughout Power Rangers?
Well, it really, so I rewatched, I was a couple years ago, I was like, I'm going to watch this all through, but I notoriously, I do not care for Power Rangers Turbo. So I watched every episode up to like the first 2 or 3 episodes of Turbo. And I was just like, I can't do this right now. And it really stalled me on that. So I have to pick that back up. But I came to realize like when Tommy becomes like the White Ranger, it is very much like all about Tommy. And it's just kind of like, I don't like that.
It was cool when we were at that age and like we were the demographic for that. Like I feel like I was like, wait, he's the White Ranger? Mom!
What? Wait a minute. You sound like Kimberly right now. No, she passes out.
Okay. But I mean, like, I feel like we were at that age at that point to be like, wow, this is crazy. This is wild. There has never been anything else in media like this at this time. Whereas now, when we can, like, look back and be like, well, actually, this is probably also not that
Yeah.
well handled.
Well, I don't dislike him as the White Ranger. It just became like everything was about that, and I was like, okay, well, this show is about a team of people, about all different
Yes.
people, and I think there's something to be said about the magic, like a big thing for me about is the chemistry of the cast, and not every cast always has that. And so I know there are some people out there who love Wild Force, but for me, I only like the yellow Wild Force Ranger. I do not like any other one of those people. I didn't like any one of those characters. Sorry, the people are probably
The
wonderful.
actors are like,
Yeah.
what did he just
Well,
say?
minus I know they'll someday they'll be like, you said you hated me as a human, but I yeah, so it's a chemistry thing for me. The same goes for Super Megaforce. I don't really or Megaforce. I don't really love a
There's
lot of.
like two characters on Megaforce, Super Megaforce that I feel like are decent characters and
Yeah.
have some sort of chemistry. And for a season that I was very excited to experience, I was just very disappointed the entire time. So I agree. I
It's like
will say,
it's like Dino Charge. I like that cast, and that's kind of what kept me going. Where I was like, oh, I like how engaged, and I don't know, it ebbs and flows. Sometimes it doesn't connect with you. I should say
right.
that it doesn't connect with me. Not I don't like it.
Yeah, obviously we don't speak for everybody.
No, of course not.
We know that like one of our friends definitely likes seasons that we are not crazy about. We don't hate them, but it's just like one of those things where it's like they're, very passionate about that being their Power Rangers. And I think that probably goes to, at what age did you experience this set and kind of what was going on in those seasons that resonated with you as a viewer, as a person, like what was going on in your
See,
life.
and I think one of the things I love about Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, specifically season 1, is just how like off the wall it really is. Like everything was kind of cardboard cutout, like copy and paste, like but it was aggressive. It was original. It was cool. All those people, I think I think there's a lot to be said about Austin St. John as Jason, whose voice was completely different when he was in his suit versus what he sounds like normally. And you never really saw that after, Amy Jo Johnson, I still love Amy Jo Johnson. Like I'm sure, if you're a Power Rangers fan and you're listening to this, you do also really like these actors and stuff like that. But I would be like anything Amy Jo does, I'm always trying to be like right behind it. But, David Yost is and Walter Jones and who I will rub in your face, having gotten to like hang out with him for a hot second, and you were like, I didn't go to there that night, but no, but all these people, they just like they kind of like they had this energy, but then also this show was like, think about it too. When it started, it was basically like science versus magic. It was dinosaurs versus it was dinosaurs, technology. It was every little check mark thing, but then it was just so weird that it was great.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's the reason why I like Footloose or like High School Musical too. I know that's such a random thing. I like High School Musical too because it's so stupid, but they're like, guys, our life is falling apart. And then he's like, you know what? I got to go sing on this golf course. I'll be right back. And I think that's hilarious.
Can you explain the Footloose thing?
Footloose is great.
Well, I'm not going to, try to dissuade you on that. I'm just saying like because I mean, many times I have come to a town where there has been no dancing because there was an accident that occurred at some point where someone was dancing and then later on they caused an accident. So I have to bring dancing back to that town.
You've seen the movie.
No, I've experienced that life.
Ultimate fan. Come on. Ren McCormick is like, who doesn't want to be Ren McCormick? Who doesn't want to drive into a warehouse and do a dance, a sweaty dance, aerobic dance?
Can you stop saying dance like that?
Dance.
Guttural dance.
Dance. No. So with that said, I think Mighty Morphin Power Rangers definitely deserves honorable mention for us. But I know I know, and you know, that sometimes it can be exhausting because this franchise leans so heavily on it without, being like, we had.
Much like this aside is exhausting for any listener.
It might not make it in. Maybe I'll cut it out, but
no. It has to. It stays.
The dance stays.
You want to be in the picture? You gotta dance.
Do I have to? All right, Ken, I'm going to let you go first. We decided that each one of us is going to say our top 3 seasons and why. We didn't tell each other what they were, but
we made an executive decision about an hour before recording this. Is like, well, we should go over this just in case. And it's like, no. Let it happen.
That's gold. This is gold. I'm going to keep using voices. So we do believe that we probably have at least one in common. Mine are in no particular order. Did you order yours?
No, I went with a kind of like gut reaction thing. Like I was like, oh, I need to make notes for this. And I'm like, well, what's my favorite season? Like, what are my 3 favorite seasons? And I was just like, well, this one right away. And then made notes on that.
Yeah.
And went from there. So that's kind of my order. I don't know if that speaks to like how much I liked those seasons more than the others, because I definitely have more notes on ones that are after the fact. I also figure we're going to talk about some of those because there are certain seasons that I imagine I like that you were just like, nah. So,
100%. I know that there are seasons that people would be like rave about and I'd be like, ugh, I don't get it. Why, of course. But
every episode of you have, never mind. You hate Wild Force. I get it. Everybody gets it.
I just don't like it. But it's what Power Rangers Wild Force is Buffy the Vampire Slayer season 6. The weakest of the series, however, contains some of the best episodes of the series. That's what I'll say, because there's no the Time Force Wild Force crossover is some of the best. The 10-year anniversary episode is one of the best. Actually, that's it. So, but anyway, sorry, this isn't our 3 least favorite seasons. That's another episode.
No, that will be. Let me talk about Operation Overdrive as being season 3 of Angel.
Are you saying you don't like season 3 of Angel? Okay. Anyway, I see what you did there too.
This show had rails. We are so far off of them.
So let's reel it back in here. And I went with what you said. It's like the 3 seasons that I come back to. There's one that I definitely favor, 1 or 2 that I don't know which is my favorite, but I do think they're testaments to how I picked ones where I've said these are ones that have resonated with me very strongly, and that I think are testaments to how Power Rangers can be this ever morphing, story of people, and you can put them in any setting, and it's kind of like, how does the virtue of humanity overtake the darkest of days?
A little on the nose for what we're going through. Right?
Well, yeah, sorry, yeah. So, Ken, give me one. Okay, never mind. You already told me.
I mean, well, so I went into this as like, these are seasons that I've gone to for, like, if I ever were to convince somebody to be like, hey, maybe give this show a shot. Like, these are seasons where I've picked episodes, like cherry picked, to be like, watch this, watch this, watch this. So my first one, we're going to go into it.
There you go.
Is, and I feel like you probably already, SPD.
Oh, no, I don't have it on my list.
No, I didn't think that you were going to have it on your list. This was the one where I thought you were going to be like, nah.
Ken, can you do me a favor?
Yeah.
This is super unprofessional for me to ask you that right now during the podcast. Can you push your microphone away from your mouth a little bit?
I can just sit back.
Okay, sorry. Your levels are coming in visually a lot higher than mine, so I worry about doing this post-production later. But also because I don't want to hear anything about SPD. Boom, nailed it. What? Just kidding. Go ahead. Tell me why.
I quit. I'm social distancing from this podcast.
This is a solo show now.
Let me tell you all about.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ken is Cassie. No, not Cassie. I ruined the joke. Never mind. I was going to say Ken is the Kendricks of this podcast. He has sacrificed himself, and he will no longer be on this show.
There you go.
I hate. It was a terrible joke. Go ahead.
Just to get into SPD, the idea of like this kind of general idea of this is not the A team of the Power Rangers. Like every season you get this like you've been chosen. You're the best of the best. You're this, like, we're Space Patrol Delta. That's what SPD stands for. And it's these group of kids who are just like, the other teams are gone, so you're what we got, I guess, is kind of like, I guess I'm a huge fan of underdog stories. And two of the Rangers that they get are like prior criminals, and it's, essentially a police force. So they bring in these like reformed thieves, and they're just like, you're on the team. And much to the chagrin of some other Rangers who are just like, are you kidding me? That dude's going to be a Red Ranger? He was a thief. So that's kind of like, you already get some kind of like dramatic stuff from that. But I love the idea that they're just not the best, which then leads into, one of the cooler arcs or episodes. I don't even remember if it was an arc, if it was like many episodes, or if it was just one that just really stuck with me. But it was like when the A Squad comes back, and it's just like, yo, the good Power Rangers are finally here. And all the Space Patrol Delta kids are just like, oh man, like what? Even though they're just like SWAT team gear with in space helmets for their costumes. But I don't know, like the season did a lot of cool things. I'm a huge, like, as a visual artist myself, like a lot of the seasons have to do with like the things I enjoy are the aesthetics. So whether it's like creature designs or the actual designs of the suits, the SPD suits, really, like, that's when I got back into Power Rangers, and I was like, I would buy figures of this after not buying them for so long. Yes, okay. I had.
I meant the Lightning collection. Did you buy the Lightning? But
not yet, no. But whoa. I also like my red is not my favorite of SPD. Like, it's like the
you bought like Doggy Kruger though, right?
I did. Okay, so yes, I forgot I bought Doggy Kruger. I bought Doggy Kruger before it went on sale for $11 on Amazon.
You put full price, like, bro. Me and you, full price, bros.
Pre-order. Social distancing fist bump. So, yes, I bought Doggy Kruger. But like, there's just something about the kind of like angular but also sleek design of their helmets.
I can see what you're talking about with that. Yeah.
And they do have the very, like, there's different things with the costumes in every season where there's.
I'm going to point out real quick, Pink Ranger, no skirt too.
Correct.
Short gloves though. Short gloves. Mm-hmm. Is that one of the first ones? Maybe. No.
Yeah.
Dino Thunder. But Dino Thunder, their gloves were the same color as their suit, so it's not as like obvious. In SPD, they had like Mickey Mouse hands.
Yes, but with silver like lining things. If they do a blue or a green.
If they do not trip. Oh God, I'm sorry. If they do bridge, buttery, yeah. I will definitely get that.
The alternate hands would be the buttery hands thing.
I want to believe they would be.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like Hasbro is very like tuned into that stuff. So I mean, like, SPD is my first go-to for those reasons outright. And they come back. Like, it's one of those things where, like, you think of like other seasons and you're like, yeah, obviously they come back for Shattered Grid, but SPD comes back for multiple things. And the Soul of the Dragon miniseries, or not, was it a miniseries or was it just a graphic novel? I think it was just a graphic novel. Came out, and like, Tommy Oliver's son is on an SPD team, like alternate universe or not, whatever.
So no. Cool. SPD is not alternate universe.
No. I mean, is Soul of the Dragon like,
No, I don't. I think the Dimensions in Danger, the 25th anniversary episode from Power Rangers Super Samurai, Regular Samurai, Super Samurai. I don't remember, but anyway, Super Samurai. I'm pretty sure. But he says JJ is the name of his son, and that's the name of the character in the comic book. So I'm assuming the comic book. They're acknowledging that. Yeah, I'm assuming. That's a big assumption, but that's what I took from it. So I don't know.
But I don't know. The fact that like it's a season that stuck with me for a while, like visually, aesthetics, and just kind of like the storylines. And you've talked about it already just in this episode, like kind of like storyline things that just kind of like stick with you.
You also know about my interaction with Doggy Kruger, John Tui, right?
Yes.
Sorry.
I hate you.
I know. He's just the coolest guy ever, and that's fine. Whatever. We just drank at a bar together. It's cool. Whatever. No big deal. Whatever. not bragging.
It's fine.
It was a moment in my life where I basically wanted to melt.
You probably did. So I mean, that's my first, like, not first in any numerical order, but that was the first one I wrote notes on. If I were to, so here's the problem, and it's the thing I'm going to pose to you as we go, and it'll be unfair just because you'll have time to think about it. But like, I can't think of the villain for SPD. Like, you think of like
I don't know his name, but I know what he looks like.
The idea that, like, you know, the A squad is the thing where I'm just like, that turn is the thing that sticks with me. It's not.
Well, so I had not, and I still technically have not seen all the episodes, but I did. This was one of the series that I was like, you know what, I'll start and watch all the way down. I have about 6 or 7 left because I do know the turn of the A squad being like, whoa. So my big thing, I don't really dislike SPD. It's just SPD is around that time where the Disney shows started to take a turn, and I like the Disney shows. I know there's a big thing where people are like, Saban versus Disney versus Neo Saban versus Hasbro, and I'm like, they're sometimes always good. At least the Disney ones were always very different. But the SPD one is like a sensory overload for me because it adopted that comic book style, like, scene change where it would like draw down a panel and like it'd have multiple panels and it would move. And SPD is when they really leaned into the explosion every 2 seconds kind of fight scenes. And that's where I was like, this is exhausting. And that was also around the time where they were very experimenting with the slow motion speed up sort of a thing. And so it's like too much for me, but there are a lot of really great moments in that show, and I do understand why that show could be great for a lot of people because it's not bad. It's just one of those ones where it's kind of in the middle for me. It's not like I dislike it, but I
don't know if it's like when I experienced that show, because I do remember the ads on ABC on Saturday morning, like they would have like the car like racing.
Well, I like the theme, the you know, and the SPD emergency, because it's I think it's Ron Wasserman did that again too, who did the original music. So.
I believe so, but I don't think I experienced that show. I was probably out of college when I saw the show in full.
Yeah.
Like I had seen episodes and I was like, this looks cool. Like the aesthetics are what got me, and like the toys were on the shelf and I was like, I'm just gonna watch this. But going back to it, and I think like just being an adult to be like, you know, seeing them handling kind of themes or ideas like, you know, being betrayed or not necessarily trusting, or like being the Charlie Brown of something. I think like as an adult, you experience that stuff way more. Whereas like the early Mighty Morphin stuff, when you're a kid, you're just like, everything's great for these kids, and I want everything to be great for me. And it's just like SPD was like, no, things suck sometimes.
You were definitely not done with college, just so you know, because SPD aired in 2005.
No. So okay, so maybe I didn't watch it until I was in college.
It could have if you could have watched repeats, but it's crazy to think that was 15 years ago, though. Isn't that crazy?
Oh, so I'm gonna go into one of my other seasons has some stuff about time.
Excuse me. You can wait. I'll go next. Have you said your piece about SPD?
SPD's great. If you haven't watched it, give it a shot. It's
not hating on it. I'm gonna finish it, Ken. I promise I'll finish it all.
It's really cool. Sorry for spoilers on the A Squad.
Well, yeah. Well, that's what happened to me. People said that to me, and I was like, "Oh no!" So
I was really
I know that
A Squad.
Other than like a little bit of foreshadowing at one point, there is no thing in the series where you think that's coming. Imagine? It was like somebody ruined that twist.
Someone watching that show being like, "I can't wait till we get the real Rangers back."
These ones with these Power Rangers and space helmets that are repainted,
right?
That is my issue with SPD, though. Is like the Sky's father having the Time Force costume, and I'm like, that show was only on 4 years ago. Do you think people really forgot it? And
it was on a different channel, Ryno.
That's a perfect segue, because the first one that I come to, so I come to two right away when people say it, but when you say what's your favorite season of Power Rangers, like I always think about Power Rangers Time Force, okay? Because I think about Power Rangers Time Force as one of those versions of a show that is very amazingly well self-contained in a very original way, but still carries that Power Rangers legacy forward.
Mm-hmm.
Airing in 2001, it was a big deal because it started. The shows used to be February through November, so this show started in February through November, and September 11th, 2001 happened, and it kind of, I think, clearly affected like where the show went a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think for in a good way, because there's a lot of messages about like there's an episode where there's and this is one of those seasons where they tried to after the Power Rangers in Space finale, they tried to really try to be like, okay, well, we're going to keep going and we need to explain how these like bad guys still exist, because they were always monsters before, and they're like, well, the monsters are gone, so what do we do? And they're like, well, in Lost Galaxy they're like a whole nother area, so it's whatever. And then in Lightspeed Rescue they're demons, and then in Time Force they're mutants from the future, so they're all mutants. But what's crazy, Time Force to me is just this beautiful full circle kind of a story. There's some of these like bittersweet moments. Like I love that they start this series off by being like, oh, well, we killed the Red Ranger in the first episode. And that Red Ranger is the fiance to this Pink Ranger. And like, so she's going back and does this whole revenge story. And then she meets his ancestor who's nothing like him, and she's angry about it. And like, so this is one of those ones where like I do love kind of the chemistry of the cast, but I really feel like it's really, really rooted in its history because of like Erin Cahill as Jen Collins, and not Collins, I'm sorry. Oh my gosh, I don't know what Jen's last name is.
Scott.
Off the top of my head. Scott, yes, sorry. Although the comic book says it's Scott's, and I'm like, I don't think
she's either plural or singular. We don't know.
Well, that's why I was like, I thought it was always Scott, but I don't know. Sometimes I'm not sure. I only just learned that it was Mighty Morphin without an apostrophe just recently, where I was like, it's one of those Bernstein Bear scenarios for me, and I am having a lot of trouble with it. But yeah, so it's that and Jason Font as Wesley Collins. Like this show they are, in my opinion, some of the best Power Rangers that we've ever had. And I just, there's something about it where like Wesley starts as this kind of like rich kid, but he wants to do something that means something. And they're like, well, you don't need. And then you've got Eric gets introduced eventually as the Quantum Ranger, and they had gone to school together. And so there's this whole like, Eric hates Wes because Wes had everything so easy and whatever, and people like him, but like, so Eric's got this like chip on his shoulder, but Wes is also not like that typical like, oh, I'm the rich kid and whatever, but he's also like learning these lessons along the way. But it's so it's kind of like, the whole season to me means it doesn't matter where or what you come from, you can still do great things, and we are all on that same level. And that's, Wes gives that speech in the End of Time part 2, I think, where he says like to Eric, where he's like, it finally comes down and he's like, we are both Power Rangers, Eric, like whether you like it or not, we are both here together, and this is it, and there's something beautiful in that. But then also, I think Ransik as the villain has this beautiful, like, so in the future, everyone is perfect. And Ransik was made from basically an error in this like genetic mining facility sort of a thing, that like, so like all the mutants, even though they, for us, they look like monsters, they're just genetic imperfections that we technically created. Like the Time Force Rangers, like, oh my god, I am embarrassed right now.
You should be.
Katie, I couldn't remember the Yellow Ranger's name. Katie is a product of that. She has that super strength because I think it was chosen that she'd be stronger. Or you could, they say it in the episode, you could pick the color of your kid's hair, the eyes, the whatever. And then like, so society was like, we'll be this perfect society, but we'll shun anyone that's different. And I think like when we start to learn that, that's amazing. But then also like, when you learn about Frax's backstory, where he was this guy who created these machines to help people, and Ransik, because of what society had done to him, basically turned that hate against Frax and took over his machines, and he thinks machines are useless. And so there's this whole like three-way kind of dichotomy, like they all. And I love the message in the finale where Frax is saying, like, where he realizes that hate is just a cycle you can't break. You know, you have to choose to break it. Otherwise it'll eat you up. And I think it just has that beautiful message in the end too. Plus, I think Time Force is one of those few shows, the few seasons where it's like the crossover episode wasn't pointless. It literally, the crossover episode, you learn how Rancic is able to make the weapons out of his like bones and stuff like that. He gets those from in the the Wild Force crossover episode.
Don't remember.
Oh, dude, the episode's so good because it's one of the few times where they bring back the entire cast, and it's a two-parter, and like Jen comes back and she's got all that leather on and she does the flips and it's in slow motion and speeds up. That's the first time they were doing that slow motion speed up stuff, and it was amazing. And you're like also the Strawcross lovers thing where Jen is like, I also love how they changed the future. Like they end up changing the future so that Alex didn't die, the Red Ranger, and he comes back and he's kind of a jerk. And she's like, hey, I fell in love with this other guy, but then they just like can't be together in the end. Oh, there's so much. There's a lot. Show. How do you feel about it?
I like Time Force. Like Time Force was one of those things where I think, like, what year did you say it was? Like 2001?
2001, yeah.
So
what year is it?
That's how I feel with social distancing.
2001?
So I feel like when it was like airing, I was like definitely removed enough from Power Rangers where I was like, I don't like their suits. Like that was always a thing where I would always
that was a big thing for me, the suits, because remember you could get the internet in 2001. It was new, but you could do it. And I remember being like, ugh,
Web TV, I had it.
The same color, gross.
I was like, oh, well, that one Ranger has green hair. I kind of like that. But the suits, I was like, I don't like it. They got the arrow pointing down. Not a fan. I did like the Quantum Ranger because it was a jagged arrow. And that was like when I was making my screen names for AIM, I had like X's in my screen name.
Arrow.
So, I definitely like the Quantum Ranger, but I think it's one of those ones where, to give you kind of a perspective of where I come from with Power Rangers, like having distanced myself after when I was little, coming back to it in college, having some sort of disposable income where I was importing DVDs from Germany, like legit DVDs from Germany before Shout Factory got the license.
Yeah, I remember.
I like got back into it, and Time Force was one of those ones where I was like, I'm not gonna like this, and then I was like, holy cow, like this is good. And it's not good for Power Rangers, it's good. Like the writing and storytelling
is by itself.
And the suits grew on me. The Quantum Ranger, I still think, is one of the more like interesting to look at.
You know what I love about the Quantum Ranger is that, I love like what you said, how he's got like the jagged arrow, and the Red Ranger is the solid arrow. The Quantum Ranger, at least because like I said, this is a Power Rangers podcast that has nothing to do with the other one. The Quantum Ranger, on our version of it in Power Rangers Time Force, he was the original Time Force Ranger. So he's the prototype, and that's why he's jagged and the color's different, and why he has like the Zord's different and everything. And I love that. I love that he's also a Red Ranger because he is the prototype that got lost. Mm-hmm. So they made it, and they were like, oh, well, we pretty much have it perfected, but we kind of lost this one thing. So we have it, and we're going to go from here. So I love what, like how you're talking about. I love that those suit designs are like that,
And the other thing is like this kind of conflict that you already talked about with like Wes and Eric is there. Like I can't really speak to prior seasons in terms of like what might have come right before, but like thinking of like the first, like, let's say 5 seasons, right? There's probably 6 maybe of like the Mighty Morphin era, like that original cast. Like there's not a ton of conflict between certain Rangers. Like you would get like 1 or 2 episodes, like one-offs, but like there's this kind of distinct conflict between these 2 Rangers where it's just like, no, you suck. Like, I don't like you. This is how being a Ranger should be, with Eric, and like how, Wes is like, no. So like there's that kind of like disconnect there where I think like that's the first time where it's been handled to that like that specific kind of quantity. But also the villain stuff is potentially the first time where we have a villain where you're able to no, it's not. Hang on, never mind. I'm gonna step back, but like it's another example of like having a villain that has a story that is legitimate. And you have to think of like, if you think of comic books, you think of film, you think of like anything where you have a villain, like what makes a good villain is being able to associate like or connect to them in some respect and like understand their background, understand why they're doing this, like not necessarily doing it for chaos sake, which is like you get the Joker stuff, like he's just doing it because he wants to see the world burn, right? But like, you know, he is chaos incarnate. Like you don't get that with Rancic. It's he has a reason. He has a thing. Like he's not like 120% bad. It's like he's bad because something happened.
He's bad because because of this, and like they created him essentially, and not essentially like how they created a virus or something like that. Like it's society made him, and so like Rancic could also be any one of us. That's the crazy part.
I'm Rancic right now. Social distancing has made me Rancic.
I mean, I didn't want to say it, but yeah.
Let me show you my metal plates and my bone monsters.
Sorry, you threw me with your bone plates.
I mean, it's also like the thing I talked about with SPD is that the fact that it's been, you know, revisited with the comic books. Time Force definitely has been approached in different aspects in the comics. Like Jen is a huge part of, and we talked about it in the toy podcast, like of our hopes and dreams for where they go with the toys. But like, you know, Time Force stuff comes up in Shattered Grid. So, you know, it's one of those things. And I think like some of those kind of more significant seasons are popping up more and more with the comic books.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're getting that Jen and West spinoff. I don't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but and I think that's great. I think it's one of those things where people are like, sidetrack here, but I would love it if someday, I get that it has to be new, but if they could collect like a team of past Rangers to be the Rangers for the entire season, like how Tommy has returned before and whatever, just give me 5 Rangers and get me Jason Font or Aaron Cahill. Give me Aaron Cahill. Not that I don't love Jason Font, but so it's called Power Rangers Sins of the Future. That's what it's called. The comic.
Not your like crossover dream.
Not my crossover dream. No, that's the Boom Studios Time Force sequel that we're kind of getting. So, which I cannot freaking wait for. But
I mean, you talked about this in the one of the prior episodes, like wanting this kind of like, why not bring back like these prior Rangers and, you know, sign them on for another season and have them do, you know,
like do the Dino Thunder thing, which is actually in one of my honorable mentions. I loved the season of Power Rangers Dino 4. What?
I didn't do that. I didn't do honorable mentions.
Well,
I have plenty of honorable mentions.
When I was doing the 3 list, I was like, I don't know, because I have 2 that I'm like, there are 2 seasons where I'm like, is this my favorite or is this my favorite? And then I have another one where I think, well, this one was like one of the best viewing experiences. And then I think Dino Thunder for me is definitely deserves an honorable mention, because I think Dino Thunder was a great example of how it was like, okay, so it's about dinosaurs for the first time again, and we brought back like a classic Ranger who was a mentor position. So he's on the show, but we also honored it by having some episodes that had to deal with that. But then also it was about the kids, and that's another cast that I love the chemistry of those. Mm-hmm. Every single person on that show, I love the character they play. I love how that show was set up. There's a lot of fun twists and turns in there. You know, some of it gets a little old, like Tommy when he's stuck in the suit and he can't unmorph, but I get it because he couldn't be in New Zealand the entire time. But you know, it's like the Smitty where like the bad guy, the General Zeltrax, was somebody he used to work with, and then
the White Ranger is like
the White Ranger is the son of the bad guy whose name is just slipping my mind right now, but I always come back to Dino Thunder because I also like the designs of the stuff, and it's one of those where it's got good energy that's very consistent, and it was legitimately, to me, I thought it was legitimately funny. It wasn't this like how they have it now or on Beast Morphers. Yeah, it wasn't like, oh well, we need to have the Bulk and Skull character, and I'm like, not every tertiary character has to be Bulk and Skull and provide comic relief. They just have to have a reason for being. And in Dino Thunder, they had the reporter, like they were other students, so we got to see the other class members' perspective. But it was also like, Cassidy was kind of wanting to be a news anchor, and Dylan was the camera guy, and so they were like secretly uncovering, but that's not really what they were trying to do. So it like brought that in a fun way. It wasn't forced, it was natural, and
the shtick is also enjoyable.
And it wasn't just the shtick wasn't only exclusive to them, because like Ethan, the Blue Ranger, and Connor, like they had a good back and forth, and I loved Kira because she was like weird. It was a very well done season.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like it deserved an honorable mention. Now, Ken, I'm going to need you to tell me another season that's in your top 3, because I've given you one of mine and an honorable mention, but give me one of your other top 3. I mean, do you argue and disagree with Power Rangers Time Force being in my top?
No, absolutely not. I mean, like I feel like I had more to say about Time Force than you did about SPD. So to continue, I've realized, like, in talking about this, like, I think my 3 seasons have some sort of connective tissue, and I'll talk about that later. But the second season, and there is a connective tissue between the first one I mentioned and this one, but it's not what you would think, is RPM, which the connective tissue is the fact that it's another acronym season for Ken. My favorite things all have to be acronyms.
Well, Ken, hold on. Because guess what? This is in my top 3 too. Boom.
Fantastic. So we're killing right there. Yeah. 2 Power Ranger bird Zords with 1 stone.
Oh.
Sergeant Stone.
2 Pterodactyl Fire Thunderbird.
Sorry, so this, also fittingly, having just recently cut my own hair, this is the Mad Max style season, so I feel like this is the same sort of thing. But we're getting into kind of like, instead of just calling them Rangers and being like connected to the Morphin Grid, which it's an apostrophe in, it's Ranger Operators.
No apostrophe in. It's not morphing. It's Morphin, apparently. I didn't know this.
Morphin. Yeah, it's a Morphin, and then you have an apostrophe at the end.
No, there's no apostrophe, Ken. I learned this. You know this.
Anyway, this is one where I did know the villain, and the villain is tied into the overall story, and it's one of those things that, hits, and it's like, oh, that's kind of messed up. Like,
it was spoilers alert for anybody who hasn't watched this, but spoiler alert.
So I'm not a huge fan of Dr. K, but she is. Hang on, I mean, like, I'll get into it. Like, in comparison to some of the other characters in the show, I guess I'll say, I definitely like her more than like certain elements. But I love the idea of why she is the way she is, and getting into that. She's the creator of the Ranger Operators, right? But also you Ranger find
series.
So to kind of preemptive, like the series starts, and it's a dude and a car, and he's racing, and he's got he has a sucker, right? He has a lollipop. He has a lollipop.
Yeah, okay. I was like,
if you remember in the original promo, he had a cigarette, and they were just like, no,
what?
Show for kids.
No, he didn't.
You need to read up on how RPM started.
He did not. Okay, so, I'm going to do that after the show, but I do not believe you.
So they didn't film it, but in the original like script stuff, like he had a cigarette. Later, there was something that happened, so that's one of the reasons why he has like the
okay, wait, but before you go on, I do want to point out that this seems to be a thing in Power Rangers history. Whenever the show is up against a wall, is that basically they were like, "This is it. We're not going to renew the show," and so everybody was like, "All right, well then let's do what we want to do," and that's kind of what happened
with RPM.
With RPM, yeah, and so and I think that's why they took a lot of the risks they did. So anyway,
they were going to do like a this kind of like rebel character, and you kind of like a darker character, and he's driving a car and he's racing to this domed city of Corinth, right?
Yeah.
And it's the last kind of semblance of
Last city in
civilization.
civilization, yeah.
Which you get all this because Dr. K narrates the intro. But he's trying to race to it, and he fights off some stuff, and this you find out is Dylan, who later on will become the Black Ranger, whose helmet is kind of like seemingly themed after a wolf, which you think like he's a lone wolf, right?
Oh my God, I never actually put that together.
Shut up, right?
No, I'm not. I literally am not kidding you, and you have just blown my mind a little bit and further said to me why this show's great.
So he's racing to the city, and he does make it, and like the city is like has a section off thing, and it's think like Walking Dead style, like you get a city and it's like, yeah, we don't let just anybody in, like we're not gonna let you in, but they do let him in. He ends up, eventually becoming part of the Ranger team. There's a little distrust there between like the Red Ranger and this guy because like, he's from the outside, blah, blah, blah. But tying it back to the Dr. K stuff, she's kind of like aloof. Like you mentioned kind of like some of the other characters in other seasons are kind of like aloof and kind of weird. And she has this kind of like distancing that she's doing.
She's definitely got a very
distinct way of acting.
Cold. She's cold and might have some sort of like a social
not a disorder, but like
no disorder would be right. Yeah, I was trying to think of like I don't know what I was going to say, but yeah, a social sort of like aversion.
Yeah. So you find out
very matter of fact.
Yes. Very almost like robotic. But
yeah.
First thing is you find out like, okay, the first like kind of like twist in the season is that like Dylan, because he doesn't really know where he comes from, he's kind of like his
he lost his memory,
kind of like a blank slate. But you find out like he has the villain of the series is Venjix, who's like a cyber villain who's kind of like...
Okay, wait. So the whole setup here is that there has been a computer virus that essentially has taken over, destroyed the world. Like Ken said, we have the last human, the last city surviving here or whatever. So it's important to know that Venjix was a computer virus, right?
Yes. So, but Dylan is like, he has parts... Is it parts inside of him, or he has like some like he has robotic Venjix originating parts?
He's oh my gosh, I forgot.
Not like a cyborg, but
well, that's what I feel like they might call him. But I remember that's why when he gets into the city, they put him in jail because he's got the mechanical parts inside of him.
So like that's what's able to like increase his abilities and things like that. But that's like the first, like, kind of like...
what I love too? The robots are called grinders. Like, they're either sandwiches or looking for some gay love.
Oh my God. Yep. That's what they were going for, actually. That was like, they were like, we don't want him to have the cigarette, but also the grinder thing is okay. But then the thing going back to Dr. K is, and I'm flipping through this, I'm sorry if you can hear it. Is the fact that, like, yes, she's the creator of the Ranger operators, but she's also the creator of Venjix.
Oh my God, and it's probably one of the most sad and depressing scenes in Power Rangers ever, because the episode, which is titled Dr. K in this season, is just so sad. Mm-hmm. And and there is a big theory out there right now that this is going to tie into Beast Morphers, because Beast Morphers is also currently about a computer virus, and it takes place now, and they've said that I believe Olivia Tennant, who plays Dr. K, will be reprising her role.
Yes.
And then there was another RPM connection to that too, though. So they were saying she's going to be reprising her role by the end. So I think in the end of this, the Beast Morphers like facility is going to take Dr. K, because her whole thing was that the government, the Alphabet Soup or whatever it was called, took her because she was like a super genius. So she's like Sheldon Cooper. She's got that kind of a social aversion.
Yeah.
And they basically were like, well, you have to do this for us. You have to do this for us. And every year on her birthday, she said for her birthday, she wanted to go outside. I just want to go outside. I just want to go outside. And so she created Venjix as kind of like just a virus so that she'd be able to go outside. But they like stopped her from getting back to the computer in time to stop Venjix from getting out. And it's so sad when you realize like that's what happened, because she feels, obviously she has the guilt associated with that, but also you're like, again, it's the beauty of oh my god, what is the Time Force villain's name that Rancic, that you're like, it's that whole like society did this to her. We did this. We did this.
I like tying it back to Beast Morphers, like thinking about that. Beast Morphers, is that supposed to be future after RPM, or is it prior to RPM?
No, Beast Morphers is like now, I think.
So like, do you think that's going to end with her like coming in and then she's like, yeah, I have to go work on this like Venjix program?
No, I think it's going to be her in like a cameo setting or something like that, because it's that, or because the way RPM ends is they put their morphers away and the red light is blinking, which is Venjix, and so you're supposed to be like, oh, Venjix survived and he's in the morpher now or something, and they never
I wonder if they're going to end it like the end of Iron Man, where they're just like, I want to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative. Like if they're going to talk about like, she's like, yeah, I have to go work on the Venjix project.
The Ranger Operator Series program. No, I am pretty sure. I think that whatever the Beast Morphers is going to morph into this sort of thing. We'll see though, because that's always been the rumor. Is the second they said this was a virus, we were like, oh, this is going to become Venjix. It's got to become Venjix, right? And I think if they do that, it'll be genius. But
I think this is one of the seasons where like the helmets I love. I do not like the costumes that much.
Well, I remember when they first like seeing them, I remember being like, oh God, another season themed around cars. God, I hate cars. And it's not really themed around the cars, but that's what the costumes look like though, right? Because they're kind of like seat belts.
They're like buckles, and like their wrist cuff, or not wrist cuffs, but their forearm cuffs are essentially tires, because this is another season that was on the air when I was in school, and I was like, I'm going to buy a Power Ranger. I don't care. I edited myself. But I was like, I don't care. But then I noticed, I was like looking at the sculpt, I'm like, oh, it's tires. And like, obviously there's a belt buckle. And so I bought the Dylan figure, and it's one of those things where I was like, the helmet's so cool. And even the Green Ranger has kind of like this shark theme. But I do not like the suits themselves.
I don't like the theme song either. It's the only Power Rangers theme song that doesn't use the word go in it, and it makes me so angry. That's the whole thing. It's go Power, like, and it's the only one that was like, nah, we can't put that in there. But I do agree with you. The aesthetic of the costumes, like, I actually think Dylan, like the Black Rangers one, looks the best, because this is the thing. This series started as a series where they had the 3 base Rangers. So you started with red, blue, yellow, and then you got black and then green. So it was one after the other. It was similar to how like other seasons have started in the past, like Ninja Storm.
That's another thing. The Green Ranger is not like, you think of like all these different teams that are starting. It's like, we have 5 people who are the best of the best. They're like, they're chosen for a reason. It's like, the thing with the Green Ranger is like, he's kind of like skeezy, like,
because his whole backstory was it's like he's kind of that, like, he's a con man, but then you realize he was conning bad people, like he was trying to get medicine to like kids or something, wasn't it?
Right. I'm trying to think, like, what's his Ziggy. Oh my yes,
Ziggy, Scott, Summer, Dylan. I always forget the Blue Ranger's name.
He was another one, like, that's one of the ones where I was like, he's so skinny, and like, he's not like, you look at him versus the Blue Ranger, and the Blue Ranger's like jacked, and you're just like, oh,
Flynn is the blue, but
I'm like, that's me. Like, if I'm a like tiny boy ranger, like, I'm Ziggy.
Oh, see, I don't like the twink Power Rangers, because it leads me to believe that you have to be young and you have to be skinny, and I'm like, that is not a Power Ranger. You don't. I'm
just specifically talking about like body type, like, but that's the other thing. Like, you think of like what Hyperforce is, the RPG thing that they do, right? So you think like the Bulk character exists, which we haven't seen really in a show, but
just like, in the game.
That's one of those things where I'm like, I can associate myself with that, like just being like this kind of like, having grown up overweight, like being this kind of like just now skinny, like that. It's definitely possible to be a Ranger Operator series green.
I also like the Gem and Gemma, the gold and silver Rangers that are added from this season as well. They're kind of like weird, off the wall, bizarre characters, but they're like fun. I have to point out too, this show really had some like really in like there's some story integrity in this show. It's got a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it took risks. Like one example is the monsters don't speak in a language we can understand.
Right.
Like unless you're of a certain level, general or monster, whatever, what virus or whatever they're called. The monsters come and they just kind of make a noise. So it's not like that Neo Saban Nickelodeon era is really defined by like the Power Rangers talk way too much when they're fighting. The Power Rangers did not used to talk that much. And I get that might be some sort of like Nickelodeon mandate or something like that. But like, sweet baby Jesus, sometimes I'm like, good Lord, shut up. Like, just do your business and move on. You are not advancing the story. None of this is funny, especially Megaforce. It was just like, it was a word for every movement. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is not what the Power Rangers do. Like, but that's the thing. Power Rangers is ever changing and ever evolving. So I should never say this is not what Power Rangers do, because they are Power Rangers. So I don't mean to be rude and say that, but all right, Ken, I'm going to give you my next one. RPM for me, I was one I didn't. It was preempted here in Orlando, which is ironic because the Rangers came out and met at Disney's Hollywood Studios, and so I was always so infuriated that I could never watch this show. So I didn't see it until it was on Netflix, and I watched it all, and I was like blown away. So I didn't see
that was a season I watched while I was running at the gym. Like many of the later seasons, I rewatched or I watched for the first time at the gym on the treadmill, and like somehow I got through, Operation Overdrive. But RPM was one of those ones where I was like, yeah, this is awesome. Like,
well, for me, one that I feel like we can't get away from saying, like how when we talk about our favorite seasons of the show, it's the turning point in the entire series of Power Rangers, and that is Power Rangers in Space.
Guess what my third is?
Is it Power Rangers in Space?
Yes, it is.
Boom. Amazing.
So, Boom Studios. Anyway.
Oh my God. Okay.
Go ahead. So I talked about RPM a lot. So why don't you intro our in space topic?
Like I've said before, Power Rangers Turbo, one of my least favorite seasons of the show, where like it was a show that I think the original source material was supposed to be like lighthearted and a joke, but they tried to deliver in a serious fashion here. I don't know what the deal was, but it did not measure up. And I remember sitting at my grandparents' house after school watching it, and my grandfather finally being like, I never cared that you watched this show before, but boy, is this show horrible now. and then like the next episode after he said that was the chase into space. And that episode is great, where they like lose the Megazord, the command center, or sorry, it's the power chamber at that point. And they go to space, and you're like, what is happening? I remember being like, what is going on? And just Power Rangers in Space took this turn where I was like, it's the first time that Power Rangers had an overarching story. And that it acknowledged its because there was if we count the 3 seasons of Mighty Morphin, I do not count Alien Rangers as its own season. It was 10 episodes. It's technically
I feel
part
like
of
that was part of another, like that was part of the season. It's like this is a reason this is happening.
That's part of season 3. So you have the 3 seasons, then you had Zeo, Turbo. So you got In Space, that's like the 6th season. And like that was kind of like, if Power Rangers is going on this route forever, it's going to be canceled. So we might as well go out with a bang. And it, adopted a lot of that like Star Trek aspect. It also leaned into that sort of only kind of hinted and rumored, not even rumored, like that, we have Rita versus Zordon, and we never see any more of that intergalactic thing that they reference, and then you have the Alien Rangers that were introduced in season 3, and you're like, okay, there's a world beyond Earth. There's always this world beyond Earth that they hint at. And finally they're like, well, why don't we go to beyond Earth? Like, why don't we put these people in space? And then also it was a season that had this overarching, like, Zordon's been kidnapped. You've got the Dark Spectre, the master of evil, and he's the one who's been kind of masterminding everything along. And Astronema is such a good character. And you've got this Red Ranger that, he's the solo person that doesn't know how to work with the group, and he adopts these other Rangers, and they kind of like all come together as a team. And then you learn that, oh, the missing sister is the bad guy. And then when she realizes what's happened to her, she comes back, but then she's got to sneak away and help them. And then she gets brainwashed. And so she's stuck there. And oh my gosh, there's so much drama, but it's also so good still. Like, I love so much about this season. I love the suit design. I love the mega ship. I love I love how everything was introduced. The finale of this season is one of the best in the series still to this day.
Yeah.
The Countdown to Destruction, I think, is just so good. Where I remember when that aired, like, I watched it, I recorded it on VHS, and I watched it over and over again. You're horrible. And I cried. Like, I was like, the show's over, and I am so sad that this show is over. And I can't believe that I thought the show was over in what year did this air? 1998? Yeah, 1998. That I thought this was over in 1998, and here we are in 2020 recording an internet show, something I knew nothing about in 1998. Actually, I lied. 1998, I made my first email address, which is Andros something something at something something, and it's because of this show. That was my, so it makes no sense when I read my email address off to anybody, but it's funny that I still have that email address 22 years later. It's my junk email now, but anyway, I loved the morpher. I loved that they still use communicators. I love that this is the first season that they didn't have to be students in high school. Like, they're kind of in high school in the beginning, but then they're like, forget it. We're abandoning
high school's
that.
over. We're in space.
Yeah. And like, I love that when you get to the finale too, you like see other Rangers. You see the Gold Ranger, the Phantom Ranger shows up along the way too. Like, it's a celebration of all things that are Power Rangers. But then it's still, even to this day when I watch it, that scene where in Countdown to Destruction, where Astronema has given the city the 24 hours to give them the Power Rangers, and when she comes back and they're like start destroying stuff, and then or before they start destroying stuff, like Bulk and Skull are like, we are the Power Rangers. It like makes me emotional because it's their journey too.
Yeah, you think of their arc is like, to think Bulk and Skull, like, if you think back to the first season of Power Rangers, and you're just like like, them falling into cake is something that happened every episode. But like, if you were to say like, oh, these characters are going to have an arc and you're going to love what happens with them, like
these will be the people that step forward on destruction, on Judgment Day to save you, and you're like, no. Like they step up and they're like, we are the power, like, we're gonna stay with it. And where everyone steps out of the audience and they say we're the Power Rangers, it still makes me emotional, because for me, that's what Power Rangers is. Like, it's all of us, and it's and that's what I love about Time Force. And to bring it all back around, is that you can be any color, any gender, from any background, anything, and you are still, all of us have the ability to be a Power Ranger. And in that moment, it's just such a beautiful moment where these people finally stand and say, no, we are Power Rangers. And then when the actual Power Rangers are on the roof, and this is the first time in history the Power Rangers have ever revealed their secret identities, like, to the world. And I just also love so much about this episode. I love how it was directed, because I love that in that moment, it's a no tricks directing. It's that flash, they go to morph, and it's literally just a firework and they're morphed. And I'm always like, man, that cut right there is so good. It's so good when they say we're the Power Rangers and they just morph and it's like them. But then that's also followed up with this like amazing scene with Andros and Ecliptor and Astronema and Zordon on the I forget what Astronema's palace is called, but her floating ship in space. And when
the spinny thing,
Yeah, and when Zordon's like, you have to kill me, or you have to destroy my energy tube, and that'll reset everyone, and we'll be on even bases again because it'll wipe out everything. And he's like, well, what's going to happen to you? And he was like, I'll be gone. That's it for me. And he's like, I can't do it. And then when Astronema comes out and he's fighting, and it's his sister, and he's just trying to, convince like, Corone, you're still with us. And then he kills her like by accident. Like, it's so good. And like, it gets so echoey, but then Ecliptor comes in because you also know Ecliptor's been reprogrammed because he raised and loved Astronema, and he's so angry at the Red Ranger because like that's the only thing he's ever cared about was her. And when she was going back to him, he let her get away. He chose to let Corone or Astronema go back to Andros. And it's one of those moments where you're just like, it's an impossible situation. And it's always one of those things too, where you're like, Ecliptor's a good point in a character where like he did, he became more than he was, but he still is destroyed in the end, and it's like Zordon too, Zordon just bites it in the end too, but
he's, I would say like, and I'm not trying to cut you up, but like, so Astronema is one of those characters, like we talk about like villains who have some semblance of an arc or some redeeming quality or something that would get a viewer engaged. And, obviously like she was turned into this, like she was Corone, like she was Andros' sister, but also like, I feel as though, Ecliptor is one of these characters who is a legitimate monster character, like quote unquote monster character. Like he is a suit character who also has these kind of like feelings and kind of like this arc where I definitely don't think they've done that before. So this is like that turning point.
Yeah, he makes me think of like he's a seed. He was like you said, he's a suit monster, so it makes you think like they were formed of evil. They were created. They're like Finster, made monsters like, and it's like, so he was evil, but like by doing what he was supposed to do, it's like kind of one of those, even in the darkest of situations, this love can still grow. Because he was still evil, but he still loved her.
Right.
So it's... Go ahead.
So cool. No, I'm just like, my notes like...
He does look cool. Are you saying
so cool? Like,
he was so cool.
He looks so cool.
Like the black and the neon green.
And that's like... But then he got
he got his like remade thing, he had like all that like silver on him too,
That's pre-Matrix, right? So like, you think like Matrix like popularized that
the same time,
black screen... like green text. Man, Ecliptor looked cool.
Yeah. Ecliptor is actually still one of my favorite design villains, I think.
Yeah,
for sure.
I would say that's easy. Like he's the one when I think like Power Ranger villain, like I think obviously Goldar, Zed, and then I'm just like, Ecliptor looked cool.
Yeah. I actually think Ecliptor doesn't really get the kind of like the legacy he deserves or something, what I mean?
It's weird because like he looks so cool, but it's like it's so...
It's not a real word. Sorry.
No. It reverberated.
It reverberated with me for
resonates. It's like very geometric, like his design, obviously, and it's just one of those things where it just like it sticks with me for some reason, like the black and green, and then the red eyes, and then his sword was cool, like.
Yeah,
there's just so much there, and the fact that he had a legitimate arc, like it's so easy to be like, yeah, you can have a cool looking character and just have like,
I think about
nonsense associated with him.
Well, I think about like how Elgar was kind of became. I wouldn't say he's the Goldar because like you said, Ecliptor is definitely the Goldar of this, but it was like Goldar in the first season was scary. And then the second season, he's like, okay. The third season, he's because he doesn't have the memory and he's with Ryno. It's like he's wait,
goofy.
That's Zeo, right?
I don't know. There's one season where he's like super goofy.
I think that's Zeo because I think him and Ryno didn't have memory and they lived with Bulk.
They were hanging out with Bulk and Skull. Is that season?
That's Zeo, yeah. Because the third season, Ryno was kind of started and he was like an idiot, but he was also scary because he destroyed the Thunder Zords. And that
he's
was
also
the first, like American
just a skull face
footage. Well, yeah. But No, I think there's a complexity to Power Rangers in space that was not seen on Power Rangers before necessarily, or at least not as refined as it was in
Right.
Power Rangers in Space, you know? And
And
then Power Rangers in Space was the first show where it was like, okay, well, look at what we did. Look how we took this idea, and the meaning, the philosophy, the idea, the essence of what this is, and we took it and we applied it to different type of a situation. And it was really the example of how you can do this going forward, you know?
right. It's also like going back to one of the things you talked about in one of the prior seasons is the idea that this is a culmination of 6 years of storylines. It's
Mm,
a continuous story this is the finite like end to it. And
yeah.
you like think of like J.K. Rowling, I guess, right? So like I'm not a huge fan of Harry Potter, but I do know that in
What?
writing like her books, the idea that she aged her characters and like wrote the books and they
As
became
the
more
writing
adult.
went. Yes, yeah.
Like so they aged with the what would essentially be the readers at that point.
Well, the first book is a kid's book. The seventh book is, it's shelved in the young adults or in the kids section, but I'm like, that's an adult's book.
Right. So you have to treat this like and obviously you don't have to treat it that way cuz like it's still approachable for children, right?
No,
Because it's still Power Rangers, but it's
1,000%. It's not
but
too
it's
serious that kids can't enjoy it.
but it's you know and we'll get into one of the reasons why I think this that ties into that but specifically but the idea that this is a culmination of those like 6 years so like you if you have kids who started with Mighty Morphin like first episode first season like you and I and then this is kind of where it goes and it's it aged with them like this is 6 years later like you're a different person the things and stuff that you associate with or are
Well,
interested
yeah,
in totally
yeah, that's
changes.
true. Yeah. Well,
So
because if you're assuming the audience hasn't left yet, because it's still so close to the original, then if your audience for season one was 10-year-olds, 10 or 11-year-olds, they're 16 and 17 now, and this was an appropriate story for them.
right. So that's one of those things where in space just like
It's
hits
also
me.
it's also one of those things that, like, I think in space, Time Force, RPM, these ones we've said, like, they're a testament to, like, I hate that, like, the idea that power or that kids can only handle a certain type of storytelling, because it's like what you just said. This was still accessible to kids. So why do they keep trying to make it Mighty Morphin Power Rangers lately? I don't like that. Like that, I think Power Rangers thrives at its best when it is its most unique. When you take it
Hmm.
and you say, how different can we make it than what it was before? And sometimes that's a complete, like, disaster, and other times it's phenomenal, and
Right.
it's so it but if I'd rather something not get lost because you can't remember the differences between it, like, oh well, they were in high school and they were whatever. Like, I want to know, like, in Time Force, I remember that when they had to work odd jobs and they lived in a clock tower. In space, they lived in a spaceship, they were traveling different planets and trying to find Zordon. RPM, it was the last city that existed. All these shows, you said SPD, they're rangers training at an academy to become Power Rangers, the policing of the future. These are shows that have these very distinct things, and I feel like lately it's been very, they're kids in high school, and I don't know the difference between anything else.
Which is odd because you think of like some of the like you're just reading the descriptions of some of the later seasons, you're just like, well, how does this tie into this? Like you think of what's the is it Ninja Storm? No, it's not Ninja Storm. Ninja Steel. Like
Yeah.
it's supposed to be this idea of like a game show thing that's like on like
Well, only
being
the
brought.
only the monsters are doing it, but, like, it's because they're broadcasting against the Rangers. It's very confusing.
So, but that's one of those things where it's just like, okay, well, you're taking this kind of unique idea, but you're also losing the thread on what could make that a significant thing or like, a
Right.
sticking point. And you think back to like Megaforce, Super Megaforce, like there's what could have been like this kind of like very tangential, like, big season is so lost because they just like treat them like kids again and there's no reason for it. Um, so
Well, and I worry that the Dino Nights or whatever it's going to be called, the season 27 is going to be that same thing, because we've seen the sides come out and they're saying that they're looking for people that look no older than 17 again. And I'm like, oh my God, at least Beast Morphers and Dino Charge, they're not necessarily in high school. But my issue with Beast Morphers is like, Nate, the Gold Ranger, who I do like. I do really enjoy Nate as the Gold Ranger stuff. But, and, what's the Yellow Ranger's name? Jackie? That's her real name.
I don't remember.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm having a brain thing, but my thing is like, okay, well, they're trying to be like, well, they're young adults, but they're really trying to be like, oh, well, she's the youngest, person and whatever. And then Nate is also super, super young, and
he's like Doogie Howser essentially.
Yeah, right? And it's kind of like, in Time Force, Wes is like 30 years old. Like he
was 26 when he.
No, he was older than that.
So no, so going back to Time Force, sorry, put a pin in space. Even Stevens, Ren Stevens.
Her name was Zoe. Sorry, her name was Zoe. Yeah.
Even Stevens has been like on her YouTube channel, right? Ren Stevens, and she does like cooking videos.
Harley Kelson Romano.
Yes, she does YouTube videos with other actors. Like she did one with like Will Friedle and like all this other stuff. She just did one with the Blue Time Force Ranger where they're going back and watching episodes.
I saw him post that. Yeah, okay. I didn't know that's what it was.
But I'm pretty sure he said that the guy playing Wes was, 26 years old when they started, and he was 18 when he filmed.
Yeah, like he was really young, and but I know that Jason Font was the older one when they did it, but I also know Jason Font was how old he was because I wrote Jason Font a letter while I was in school, a senior in high school, and Jason Font was born in the year 1974. So in 2001, he was so he would have been 30. Oh, you're right. Yeah, I guess that is 26. Yeah, he would have been 26, 27 when they were filming. I must have interviewed him when he was like 29 then, because I knew around where I was like, oh, he's older. But he was older of them. But I was also like, they were like, well, they weren't in high school, so who cares?
Right. So that was like totally acceptable. So I'm sorry, that was an aside, but that's because I watched that this week while we're under quarantine. But if you haven't watched it, watch it. It's pretty good.
But Erin Cahill, when they filmed that, I guess she was 20. He would have been 18. Yeah, sorry. So he was a little. I mean, he looked younger too. But also, they weren't trying to be like, oh, these people are even young. They were just basically like, no, these are police officers, Time Force officers, whatever. And I don't know. I miss that. I miss that kind of like
one of those things like where it's like we're talking into an echo chamber of the idea of like we're older, like we're not old, but like we're older, and we're just like, well, I want to see more stories with, older people. And it's like it's not just that. Like I'm fine with seeing stories about kids. Like I love Stranger Things. I love like Goonies and all this stuff. Yeah, but it's like it's one of those things where it's like you can do stories with characters outside of high school. Like I feel like you're kind of like writing yourself into a corner.
Exactly. Like how many stories? Like okay, well they're disappearing during school, they're whatever, and like it's not. You're not making it interesting enough. I feel like it's like I don't know. I feel like we're in a back up against the wall moment again, where I'm like, you should pull out all the stops, especially if you're about to do another dinosaur season. But
right,
these are kind of our thoughts on what's to come, and I feel like we're trailing off into other areas now. But
I have other in space thoughts.
Oh, tell me more in space then.
Because so this is like our second season that we've had on the same list. I had other notes that were aside from the villain things. Like I'm just making check marks here. But the Ninja Turtles crossover as kind of like a big thing.
I have the episode. I have the issues, but I haven't read it yet.
No. I'm talking about the in space crossover.
I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about the Boom Studios one. Yeah.
Yes, I'm like talking about the comic book. So that's in here. But this was as someone who grew up loving Ninja Turtles prior to Power Rangers and having that conflict of interest, essentially, to have an episode where there was a crossover was a big deal for me. Even though it was a crossover with the most garbage of Ninja Turtles, which is the Next Mutation stuff. It was still insane to know that there existed a thing where they had Ninja Turtles physically interacting with Power Rangers, and the fact that the Power Rangers interact with them and they're just like, wait, like the cartoon characters, right? So like it's a weird thing that
I
exists.
think like who was the comic books? Were Power Rangers the comic books? And
No, the Power Rangers talk about like the Ninja Turtles, like the comic books or the cartoon characters. They say something like that. But that was like Saban had a like they were making Next Mutation at the time, so like it was one of those things where it just made sense. But still to this day, like I'll periodically rewatch that episode because even though it's not good, but it's still one of those things like I can't believe this exists.
It's so weird, right? It's just so like yeah, it's just one of those moments where you're just like, like I don't know.
But it's so cool, and it's like, and we had talked earlier, talking about like, you know, to think how many years have passed since this, like 22 years. It would take 22 years from when they did their crossover episode with Power Rangers and Ninja Turtles to get another Ninja Turtles Power Rangers crossover with Boom Studios, which you're talking about. 22 years, right? So like people have become legal adults in
make
the
me
time.
Throw up. Do not do this to me. I don't care for your age additions.
So like now Boom Studios is doing like the crossover with Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers, and it's one of those things where like people like I've read the first I think 2 issues and it's good. Like the art is amazing and I'm curious where the story's going. Like it has me intrigued. It's great, and to see these kind of like crossovers, like I feel like it's people who were our age when this was happening. It's like, no, I could do this better, who are now in careers where they can do it better. But that was one of those big things. Like to see it on TV is still an insane thing. And then to digress to Psycho Rangers, having them be introduced in space. And that was like when I was very angsty and I was like, yeah, Psycho Rangers are cool. To the point where on my DeviantArt, I made a comic book where the Hero Ranger was a Psycho Ranger. He got a Psycho Ranger morpher.
Oh, look at you.
So there's definitely stuff that resonated at that point when I was that young.
Morpher? Is that what you just said?
Like the Psycho, like it was a character who was probably a criminal of some sort, and he found a Psycho Ranger morpher, I believe. I don't remember. But he became like he was a red Psycho Ranger, and he was fighting the Green Ranger who killed every other Ranger. But the person who was the Green Ranger, can you guess who it would be?
Tommy?
Adam. So I took all my favorite things. I was like Green Ranger, Adam, Psycho Ranger, like mix them all together. It's like a peanut butter cup. But I mean, like that's just one of those things. Like you think of like how young you are when you were just like creating weird stuff and things that stuck with you, and to go back to it. Like In Space is still one of those seasons where I can go back to it and be like, there's so much good here. And like even distancing myself from the nonsense I was doing when I was that young is pretty insane.
It's just weird to think, you know, here we are, 2020, and we start. Well, I remember the commercials for the show, and it started like I watched the first episode in 1993. Like nothing. Also, it's getting that moment where you're like, oh, some people call it silly, but I'm like, there's not been many things in my life that have been in my life as long as Power Rangers have been in my life.
All right, there's like 2 things I can think of that I care anything about. Like I guess there's been plenty of things that have been in my life that long, but like aside from family, obviously, but like things like media wise that you ingest and you care about and you're like invested in, there's very few things.
Yeah. I think it's an underrated. I feel like I would be sad to see Power Rangers go out before its 30th, and I feel like it is one of those things that it is an underexploited franchise still, you know? I think that we are in a moment where if Hasbro can loosen the reins like Saban never could, then we could get our adult version of this show, or some sort of like PG-13 Stranger Things Netflix version of this, or the animated, maybe an animated story, which is the Boom Studios like telling of Shattered Grid, something that incorporates all different aspects of the show, but still roots it in Mighty Morphin, but appeals to people. And then you could have everyone do voiceovers, so you don't have to worry about cast egos or anything, but also you can get people to play maybe who are older that don't look like those characters anymore, stuff like that. We're just in that moment where it's a moment of possibility right now. And I'm hoping I'm going to remain positive about where it goes for right now, So there you have it. I think those are each one of our top 3 seasons, our favorite seasons of Power Rangers. Not to say that we don't also like other seasons of Power Rangers, but I think, Ken, you would agree you'd like to hear from anyone that's ever listened to this about like what their favorite season might be.
Nope, I'm good.
3? Oh no, you don't want to talk to anybody.
Absolutely, ever. I would like, differing opinions would be huge, especially like if there's things I've missed, or like, it's what, 27 years of Power Rangers. So at this point, I would like, maybe I missed something. So please, yes, tell us.
Well, you want to talk to us about one of the seasons we talked about. We'll definitely talk to you about that. You want to try and talk to me about why you think Wild Force is good. I will happily entertain that conversation. But no, I am always up to chat with anybody that really does want to talk about Power Rangers. And we said it on the social media stuff in the description of this podcast. If you've seen one episode, or you've seen 100 episodes, or just one episode 100 times, we want to have discussions. So this is a safe space. We're not going to judge you, but you are welcome to judge us. If you are listening to this on Apple Podcasts, I do ask that you maybe rate and review us, give us some constructive feedback, perhaps maybe topics for future episodes you'd like to hear discussed too, because I'm also down for that. We do have our social medias up and running. If you go to Twitter or Instagram, we are Podcast Rangers on there, at Podcast Rangers on both of those. I did not set up a Facebook page because I don't like Facebook.
He's not a Facebook person, people.
No, I'm not a fan. Not a fan. So maybe someday we'll do it, but I don't know. But I just... Twitter and Instagram are easier. So if you want to communicate with us, those are the places to maybe reach out and say something and like to chat with you. We'll have a YouTube channel at some point. I'll do some videos of the toys and stuff like that. But thank you, Ken, for having this discussion as always.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you out there for listening. Again, if you want to subscribe to however you're listening to this, whatever channel you're listening to this on, and please communicate with us. Let us know what you think of the show. You can also send us an email at podcastrangers@gmail.com. So Podcast Rangers on Twitter, Instagram, and Gmail. So that'll do it for this episode of Podcast Rangers. We'll see you next time with another episode. Until then, oh man, I thought I was going to come up with something really cool to say here at the end.
He didn't, though.
I didn't. So
you heard it here first.
Yeah, just goodbye.